Finally, we would like to welcome Maxine Francis Roper to share her experience of developing a career in writing and journalism. You may have seen her before. She has a focus on arts and education. Maxine is a successful advocate of positive message living with dyspraxia. Please welcome Maxine Francis Roper.
Good morning. Can everybody hear? Excellent. I've got a loud voice anyway. So thank you very much to Julia and Frank for inviting me to speak today. This is actually the third time I've spoken at a SpLinter group event, and it's a really great honour to be asked to speak again. I'm always especially happy to be in the North East, which is an area that's very sentimental to me, as I was a student here, and 10 years ago now, actually. It was quite frightening. And it's also where I was diagnosed with dyspraxia at the age of 21, and where a life which had previously been quite confusing and daunting a lot of the time started to make a little bit more sense. As you've heard, I'm a freelance journalist and writer. I'm 31 now, and I actually did my first big pieces of journalism when I was still studying for my GCSEs and A-levels. And around then, I also started designing basic websites, very basic by today's standards, but I used those websites to write about things that I was interested in for other people to read. So it's a platform for my writing. It was pretty clear from a very early age that my strength was in writing, and that was a standout thing. And I always knew that whatever career I went on to do would involve it, and journalism seemed to be the obvious choice for that, and it was somewhere that I felt that I fitted in, which was a pretty rare feeling when I was young. After I went to university at Durham, I trained as a journalist, specialising in magazine features. I became involved in public awareness raising of dyspraxia because of an early experience in the workplace when I took on a job which was advertised to me as a writing job, but actually involved very little writing. You had to be able to spell, but that was about it. And what it did involve was a lot of admin at a very high level, which caused various dyspraxia-related problems. I was responsible for inputting TV listings onto a database, digital TV listings, and programmes started to go out at the wrong times. And they didn't like that, strangely. Unfortunately, this was the peak of the recession, and so it was very difficult from there to get a paid job in journalism, which led me to going freelance. When I contacted an organisation down south where I live, which supports dyslexics and dyspraxics in the workplace, they invited me to speak about my workplace experience, and that then led into being asked to do a lot more speaking and training engagements with various businesses and organisations in how to support, identify and support people with dyspraxia. The rest of my presentation today is probably going to be a lot shorter than it has been in previous years, but I hope also a lot more profound and personal than it has been before. The title of this event is From the Horse's Mouth, and I really can't be more raw and direct about how I've managed to overcome certain difficulties in my life than I'm about to be. Today, rather than giving you, as I have in the past, general advice and suggestions, I want to talk very specifically about some of my very recent experiences. And rather than telling you all about how dyspraxics are ambitious and driven and resilient, I'm really going to show it. When I last came to an event here last summer to talk about dyspraxia and creativity, I was about to celebrate my 30th birthday, and I was very bouncy and happy after meeting up with some very dear friends of mine up the road in Durham, my university town, as I said. And I'd also been kept up the night before sharing jokes on Twitter with a good friend of mine who I didn't actually see a lot in person because he was always busy and often abroad with his successful business, but who meant a lot to me and who I always looked forward to chatting to when he was around. He was also a Durham student a decade before me, and he was also dyspraxic, although I found that out by complete coincidence. I met him through completely unrelated work, through journalism, and he actually only brought it up because I started talking to him about the awareness work that I do. And he had barely, I don't think, ever talked about it to anybody but me. Then in November, almost exactly a year ago, I received the terrible news that friend had very, very tragically taken his own life. He was actually the second friend of mine to do that in 3 years, and I was completely, completely devastated. If I'm really, really honest, when I was first asked to speak here, and I knew that it was going to be in November, I wasn't so much looking forward to standing in front of an audience talking about how brilliant and inspiring my life had been, because for the previous few months I'd felt completely broken, and I couldn't think how on earth I was going to stand in front of people and paint a good picture of myself and my achievements. Unfortunately, after hearing that news, my mental health deteriorated, and a lot of the anxiety that I'd had when I was younger and that I felt belonged to a time before I was diagnosed and a time before I was doing the work that was right for me came back. Although I had a lot of support from my friends and family, which I'm very, very grateful for, I also struggled with my work. I stopped socialising, I stopped enjoying a lot of my life, I started suffering from anxiety attacks. I actually spent 4 hours in a British Transport Police office at Leicester Station waiting to be driven home on the way to a friend's birthday weekend. With every respect to the lovely police and paramedics that looked after me, this is probably not how any of us would have preferred to spend our time. But then, after I thought a bit longer about what I was going to say today, I realised that actually, out of that really, really terrible event, over the past year, I've achieved 2 of the biggest achievements of my life, and certainly achievements that mean a lot more to me because of the fact that I'm dyspraxic, and that I want to share with you as the ultimate example of how somebody with dyspraxia can turn the worst possible adversity into a positive in their career and in their personal life. First of all, I took up running. My mum suggested that I run for a mental health charity in honour of my 2 late friends. Like a lot of dyspraxics, my experience of sport before that could be summed up as lurking at the back of the gym, desperately trying not to be noticed. I dropped sport out of my life like a hot potato as soon as I possibly could. But here I was, at the age of 30, determined to take up running, determined to do this for charity, for my friends, come what may. I downloaded the NHS Couch to 5K app, which I don't know if some of you know. It is a rather babyish, actually, app. It's all pastel colours and stick men. It's like it's designed for small children, but probably what I needed at the time. And despite the patronising-ness of it, I followed it absolutely religiously. Getting up at 6 a.m. in the dark to go out running. And I'm a very big fan generally, as you might know if you've heard me speak before, of using phone apps to organise my life. I have reminders and list apps that tell me what I'm supposed to do and where I'm supposed to be, what I need to take with me when I go away. Within 6 to 8 weeks, this Couch to 5K app, I could run for half an hour without stopping. Within another 6 to 8 weeks, I could run for an hour. And I ran a 10K, the Bupa London 10K, and I raised £700 for Mind, which was fantastic. And then in October, I ran the Oxford Half Marathon, and I also got a Mind charity place in the London Marathon, which I'm just about to start training for. This was before January. I'd barely even run around the block. I trained really, really hard. I even ran in the morning on my birthday in the drizzle. My birthday was mid-June. It hardly ever rains. It was the first rain on my birthday I could remember, and I went out in the morning and went for an 8K run. And with that, I basically lost all of the self-doubt that I used to have about nearly everything, never mind about running. And although my life has been very hard over the past year, as I've said, without having the running as a focus took the very hardest of the edges off it. And it's a really good example, I think, of how having an emotional lead into something can help you overcome your natural physical awkwardness and difficulties. Often when we talk about what jobs are best for dyspraxics, I talk about finding an emotional connection to your work. And that applies no matter what job you're doing. If it's something that you can find a way to feel positive about and feel valued in, somehow, you will do a lot better. When I came here last time, I also talked a lot about how dyspraxic people often have empathy and how that can be used creatively and in the workplace. And something else that happened in my life after that tragic news last year illustrates that to me again in the most profound of ways. When I was first diagnosed as a student, way back in 2005, one of the first things I did was to start a blog about not exclusively about, I was blogging anyway, but I started to blog about my diagnosis journey, which then caught the attention of a man who worked for a service up in Scotland, which supports students with dyslexia and dyspraxia through assistive technology. Blogs were still quite a new thing then, and it was a bit easier to get noticed. He was interested in what I wrote. He was very intrigued by my honesty about this thing that was still very new to me, that I was still coming to grips with. And basically, we've stayed in touch ever since then. And he's quite a wealthy and generous man. I didn't know this in the beginning, that he's a patron who has given away a lot of his money that he's made in computers to young people, both with disabilities and without, in order to support them in their careers. Unfortunately, late last year, he had a serious health scare and he had to go into hospital to have cancer treatment. The night before his surgery was also the night that I found out about my friend's suicide. As you can imagine, having heard that news, I didn't sleep a wink. Dyspraxics can have trouble sleeping at the best of times, as some of you will know. But still, something in me remembered that this other friend who had cancer was about to go into hospital. So at about 5 in the morning, I sent him a very quick email, just with my best wishes and saying, I hope everything goes okay. And I apologised for the crazy timestamp, and also because of, it not being as long and coherent as I would have wanted. But I said, I've just heard this really, really tragic news about a friend, forgive me, etc. Thankfully, the surgery went okay, and he made a full recovery, which is fantastic. But some months later, because of the time that I'd taken off after I'd heard that terrible news about my other friend, with all the shock and the grief and the mental health struggle, I was struggling a bit financially. Being self-employed and having to be creative and generate ideas was very difficult. And so I put out a call on Twitter asking, did anyone have any work for me, basically. And then the friend who'd had the cancer treatment wrote to me, obviously having worked out that me asking for work on Twitter meant I wasn't in the best place. And he actually offered me some of his financial support in order to help me get my business back on track. He said to me that he was so touched that even at this very difficult time, when I just had the worst news about somebody for the second time, I had actually thought of him and written to him and wished him well for his surgery. And he said that he felt that deserved a recognition. And so that's what I got. Nothing seedy, no conditions attached, just one of life's good eggs, doing something to help somebody that he thought of as being a good egg. So because of sharing my story about dyspraxia when I was diagnosed, and because of the empathy that I showed to somebody at a difficult time in their life, despite what I was going through in my own, I managed to get some support at a really vital time and save my business from what was quite a difficult place. That is really the most important thing I've achieved this year, and without it, I would very likely not be having the confidence to stand here today. But because I've had that support, I believe that anyone with dyspraxia deserves that kind of opportunity. And I think everyone can find that opportunity to turn their life around when they're struggling. And yes, there's an element of luck involved, I'm not going to lie. There always is, whether you're dyspraxic or not. And I was very lucky to know somebody who was able to give me that support when I needed it. But it wasn't just luck. It was also about a relationship that I built over 10 years, from being a student, tentatively blogging about my dyspraxia, into my early 30s. Because of my qualities as a person, because of something that he saw in me, and my experiences of being dyspraxic and having to bounce back over the years. And I hope for those of you who are dyspraxic and struggling, and for those of you who are employers who are looking for examples of what positivity and drive dyspraxics can bring to the workplace, this little story from the past year of my life has shown you something of that. I'm going to finish there, but I'm very happy to take questions. I'll be hanging around, obviously, and at any point today, if you have any questions, just come up and ask. And also, I'm very happy to send round. I've still got copies of previous presentations that I've done. If anyone's interested in those, I can send those over. Thank you very much for listening.